The storm came without warning. One minute the sea was calm, a sheet of blue glass reflecting the dying sun, and the next, it was chaos. The waves roared like angry beasts, slamming into the sides of the small tourist boat. I remember the sound of people screaming, the wood cracking, and the cold salt water swallowing the world. Then, darkness. When I opened my eyes, the world was silent except for the distant hiss of waves on sand. My head throbbed, my clothes clung to my body, and I realized I was alive. But I wasn't alone. Before we go further, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of fate, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. It really helps stories like this reach more hearts. When I turned my head, I saw her, a young woman, lying motionless on the shore. She couldn't have been more than 26, with dark hair tangled in seaweed and skin pale under the morning sun. Instinct kicked in. I crawled toward her, checked her pulse. Faint, but there. I pressed down on her chest, whispered for her to wake, and when her lips parted and she gasped, relief flooded through me so hard that I laughed. It sounded strange in the silence, like laughter didn't belong there anymore. Her name, I'd learn later, was Alara. The island was small, maybe a mile or two across, surrounded by jagged rocks and dense jungle. There were no signs of civilization. No boats, no smoke, no footprints but our own, just the endless sound of wind and water. Over the next few hours, we scavenged what we could from the wreck, a broken box of granola bars, 2 half-empty water bottles, and a soaked backpack that belonged to her. Inside were things that suddenly mattered more than gold: a lighter, a scarf, and a small flashlight. We built a crude shelter with branches and palm leaves, and by nightfall, a small fire flickered between us. That first night we didn't speak much. The sky was clear, littered with stars that felt too close, almost like they were watching. I remember glancing at her, the light from the fire painting gold across her face, and thinking how fragile she looked, and how strong she must have been to survive the sea. Days turned into weeks. We learned the rhythm of the island, where the coconuts fell, when the tide brought fish close to shore, how to collect rainwater in hollowed bark. The struggle was constant: hunger, exhaustion, fear. But the strangest thing was how life slowed down enough to make us see things clearly. Alara was unlike anyone I'd met. She wasn't the kind of person who panicked. She was calm in a way that made chaos seem manageable. She talked about her family sometimes, a younger brother she'd practically raised, a mother she hadn't called in months, and a fiancé she wasn't sure she still loved. "Funny," she'd said once, staring out at the horizon. "You don't realize how little matters until everything's gone." For me, it was the same. I'd been a photographer, always chasing deadlines, ignoring calls from my sister, skipping birthdays because I thought there would always be another. Out here, the world had stripped me bare. The noise was gone. All that was left was survival. And her. We grew closer, not through words, but through the quiet moments. The way she smiled when the rain finally fell after days of heat. The way she'd hand me half her share of food when I pretended I wasn't hungry. There were nights when the wind howled, and she'd move closer, our shoulders brushing, the fire casting long shadows across our faces. It wasn't romance then. It was comfort, the need to feel human when everything else felt wild and cruel. But something changed one evening. It was after a brutal storm that had nearly torn our shelter apart. We'd spent hours fixing it, soaked to the bone, hands shaking with fatigue. When it was finally done, she sat beside the fire, her hair clinging to her neck, eyes distant. I asked her what was wrong, and she said softly, "I keep thinking about the life I had, and wondering if maybe it was all a lie." She told me her fiancé wasn't the man she'd thought he was, that he cared more about appearances than love, that before the trip she'd almost called it off. And then, she said, looking at me through the smoke, "I met you. I didn't know what to say. I wasn't looking for anything. I didn't even know if we'd ever get off that island. But there was something in her eyes that night, a kind of quiet truth that needed no answer. We just sat there, the fire crackling between us, and for the first time, I didn't feel alone. The days that followed were both beautiful and cruel. The island gave us sunsets that painted the sea in pink and gold, and nights so dark the stars looked like lanterns. But it also gave us storms, hunger, and endless uncertainty. Still, we found joy in small victories, catching fish, finding a new stream, laughing over mistakes. We became each other's sanity. One morning, I woke to find her gone. Panic hit me like a wave. I ran through the trees, calling her name until my throat burned. I found her near the cliffs, standing barefoot at the edge, watching the sea. She didn't turn when I approached. "Do you think anyone's looking for us?" she asked quietly. I wanted to lie. I wanted to say yes, of course, but I couldn't. "Maybe," I said, "but if not, I'll still find a way." She finally turned to me, and that was when she said it. Her voice trembled, but her eyes didn't. "I'm just a woman," she whispered, "and you're what I want." It was such a simple sentence, yet it carried everything. Fear, hope, surrender. For a long moment, the only sound was the ocean. Then, slowly, I reached out and took her hand. I didn't promise forever, because forever didn't exist out there, but in that moment, we had something more real than any promise. The next few weeks blurred into a strange kind of peace. We built a stronger shelter together, shared stories of the past, dreams of the future. Sometimes we'd sit for hours without talking, just listening to the rhythm of waves. It felt like the island had become a world of its own, one where time had stopped, but nature has a way of testing love. One night, lightning split the sky, and the fire we'd built spread fast. The dry leaves caught, and before we could stop it, half the jungle was burning. Smoke filled the air, and we ran toward the shore, coughing, eyes stinging. That's when we saw it. A faint light far out on the water. A ship. We screamed, waved torches, did everything we could to be seen, and somehow, miraculously, they saw us. The rescue came at dawn. They found us exhausted, covered in ash, but alive. As they pulled us onto the boat, I looked back at the island, the place that had broken and rebuilt us. Alara stood beside me, her hand still in mine, eyes filled with tears she didn't hide. When we reached the mainland, reality hit hard. Phones buzzed, reporters asked questions, families cried. For a while we stayed together, trying to hold on to what we'd found there. But life moved fast again. She had to face her old world and I had mine. Still, something between us had changed forever. Months later, I was walking along a beach near my city when I saw her again. She was standing near the water, hair blowing in the wind, just like that first morning on the island. When she turned and smiled, I knew the island hadn't been a curse. It had been a beginning. We talked for hours that day, about the noise of the city, the way coffee never tasted the same after rainwater, and how strange it felt to have walls again. Before we parted, she looked at me and said, "I don't want to forget what we were on that island, because that was real." I watched her walk away, but deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. Some connections aren't tied by chance. They're carved by survival, by the moments when two souls see each other completely. Sometimes, when I look at the sea now, I remember the silence, the firelight, and her voice saying, "I'm just a woman, and you're what I want." And I realize that even if we lose everything, what really saves us isn't rescue boats or fortune. It's the person who makes us believe that we're still worth saving. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It helps us bring more real, emotional stories to you. And before you go, tell me in the comments, if you were trapped on an island, who's the one person you'd want by your side? This was We Were Trapped on an Island. And she said, "I'm just a woman, and you're what I want." Thank you for watching, and never forget, sometimes isolation shows us who we truly are.